All right, what's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Book and title: Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father. Amazon Kindle. Create space. What's reasonable or unreasonable? Um, this is gonna be another relationship type talk. From a male perspective, I gotta ask what's reasonable. You know, because there are guys who complain that if they treat a woman nicely, they get treated with disrespect. And if they treat a woman with disrespect, that woman in turn gives them drama, and but at the same time, her winds up having sex with these guys. So what's reasonable? Do is a dose should you be 50% nice and 50% nasty to women, and that way it'll balance it out? What's reasonable? Um, Guys talk about women have not preferences, not standards, but unrealistic expectations. So what's reasonable? If is if height is your issue, how much taller is to say that you want a man who's, I don't know, 6'2" and up? Is that reasonable if you're 5'2"? I mean, would it be more reasonable to have a guy who's taller than you when you put on your heels? Would that be reasonable? Or, whatever. If a guy is, if you want a guy to be like very athletic, if you are not that athletic, then would it be reasonable to get a guy who's semi out of shape? Would that be reasonable? If you want a guy that makes six figures, okay, would it be reasonable if you make 75,000? Is that reasonable? Um, if the guy doesn't have kids, would it be reasonable if he only wants to talk to other women who don't have kids? If the guy has kids, if he has a kid, is it reasonable to talk to should a woman who he talks to have one, maybe two kids? Or if she doesn't have kids or doesn't want kids, that makes sense. But if he has one and she has three, is that reasonable? If How can I say this? If you feel like he's a hoe, would it be reasonable to only see him as a fuck and not chase being in a relationship with him? Is that reasonable? If if he wants you to be his girlfriend and he courts you, he dates you, he just does the traditional things that guys who are interested do to get a woman. Is it reasonable to reciprocate those actions? If you move in with a guy and you want him to be the man in the relationship. If he pays the rent or mortgage, is it reasonable for you to pay the utilities? Is that reasonable? If he wants a peaceful household and you kind of like to be combative, is it reasonable to keep the peace without fighting, or is it reasonable to fight until you tired and now you satisfied? Which one is reasonable? If you're one of those people who want to go out all the time, if you want to go out 3, 4, 5 times a week, and because you with a guy, he has to pay because he's the guy, is it actually reasonable for him to take you out 3, 4, 5 times a week and you never pay? Is it reasonable if you pay half of the time because you wanted to go out that many times? Is that reasonable? If a guy gives you what you want and you don't respect him because he gives you what you want, what the things you say you want, is that reasonable? If a guy tells you no because he's tired of giving you what you want, or he just like, that's not a good idea, and you say, I don't want to fuck with you no more because you're not doing what I want you to do, is that reasonable? Um, if you want the new guy to, in some ways, take an ass whipping for everything the old guy did, is that reasonable? Excuse me. If you get married and you get the house, you get the car, you get the kids, you might even get a portion of this guy's retirement. And is that reasonable? And even if that's not reasonable and you get it anyway, if he doesn't talk to you, can you really be upset? Is that reasonable? If you use a man's children against him as a weapon and he doesn't want to bother with you anymore because of that, is it reasonable for you to be upset at him about it? Is that reasonable? If if your relationships are predicated by your girlfriend's approval of the people that you messing with, or they got more say in your relationship than you, or girlfriend, parents, whatever, friends, is that reasonable? If if you act like you don't love a guy that you're with, but you tell him that you love him in your heart, but you never show him, is that reasonable? You got to put up with the toils and strife. Oh yeah. Is it reasonable if you want a guy, if you have kids, to help you take care of your kids, but you don't help him take care of his kids? Is that reasonable? Now, depend. I mean, if a woman can see this and she can make up her own instead of and not ask me questions about, what about the women? You can make your own video responding to that because I can't speak for you. But what I'm speaking for is the guys who have these type of complaints. So when these questions are posed, as I asked before, is it reasonable? I'm out, man. Bobby Womack, take us out there.